people who are watching it on video the measure number and just give us a brief outline of it. Please introduce yourself. Each time, the first time you speak, please introduce yourself to the camera. Then we'll have some questions about the measure and we'll go from there.
Do you want to do it, or do you want?
Yeah, I want you to do it.
You want me to do it? Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having us here today. We hope to earn the Willamette Week's endorsement for this measure. It's ballot measure 2646, and this is a renewal of the local option measure that will be on the May ballot. And voters in Portland have several times, starting in 2000, they instituted the local option tax, and then several times have renewed it. Again, this is a renewal. It's the same rate as it was last time, so not a rate increase. Is
this continuation of the same measure that passed in 2000 originally? I know it's a
It changed in 2007. There was a rate change.
Okay, all right.
But it's still the local option mechanism, so post ballot measure 5. A tool was given to local communities if they want to do it. So Portland started in 2000 and has renewed it successively for a number of years since 2000.
Okay.
It is a critical piece of our funding. So obviously we get funds from the state from the state school fund, but this provides over $100 million annually to our budget, and that what it pays for, and it's very specific about what it pays for, which is teachers and classroom supports. It will pay for approximately 655 teachers next year. So you can imagine without this what our classrooms in our schools across the city might look like. Every school benefits from the teachers and the staff that are supported by this fund, and it helps PPS provide a comprehensive education, smaller class sizes, all the things that you get when you have 655 more FTE.
From a budgeting perspective, do you just throw it into the general fund? It's
No, it actually is segregated out into a sub-account. And did we bring the by school?
Yep,
with
it's
them?
in your packet.
Okay.
It's funding by school.
And so we also have built into this measure a number of accountability mechanisms. One is that every year the Community Budget Review Committee provides a report to the community on how the local option dollars are spent, and you can see, it's the chart,
Yes.
by school, what staff are.
So can you briefly explain what the criteria are for allocation by school? Is it based on, is there a poverty?
It's a formula.
Yeah. So it's not, but you're saying it's not just a per capita formula.
I believe it's a per capita formula.
So how would that be different than just being thrown into the general fund and commingled with the other monies?
Well, we have been really clear that we're going to be using the funds for teachers and classroom assistants and EAs and other classroom supports.
But there's no component of giving more to Title I schools or anything like that.
It goes through a formula.
Can you briefly describe the formula?
I believe it is, I'll have to double check. I believe it's per student.
Okay.
Enrollment.
But if I'm inaccurate, I will.
Yeah. Okay.
So enrollment, on this document, you say that you currently serve 44,000, more than, actually, shouldn't be over, should be more than, hate to correct your English, should be more than 44,000 students, but this document says the projected enrollment is 41,000 students. So you've got two documents that appear to be in conflict. Can you tell me which one's right?
I don't have those two.
Yeah, they're right here. There's that
The one
number
is the
and then
ballot
that.
language. The measure language is the first thing here, and then this is the projected enrollment for 24-25.
This is,
I'm just asking what you project your employment to be, your enrollment to be next year, and is it one of those two numbers or is it a different number?
it's the number that would be in the ballot measure.
Which is which number?
It
Currently serves over 44,000 students.
So Why is that projected number off by 3,000
I
students?
can find out. I don't have the answer right now. I have to talk
But as far as you know, that's wrong. So you do think you're going to have 44,000?
I believe that it's going to be somewhere between these two numbers, but I'll have to get you a number.
Okay. And I realize projecting employment is a very difficult thing.
Enrollment.
Enrollment is a
Yeah.
very difficult thing to do, so we'll stipulate to that. But what have been the trends for the last 5 years?
The trends for the last 5 years is it's been, since COVID, it's been declining. Now,
So like, can you tell me what it was in
that I don't
2019,
know.
2018, roughly?
A couple thousand more,
Like 46?
roughly. You should take this as what's in the ballot title, because this has been extensively pressure
Yeah.
tested and reviewed.
Yeah, so I'm looking,
I mean,
and this isn't a gotcha question, but in 2019, 2020, enrollment was 49,500. So we're down about 5,000. Let's assume this 44,000 number is correct. We're down more than 5,000 students. Tax base is much bigger, but you're asking for the same rate.
Actually, because of what's happening in downtown Portland, the commercial property tax base will actually bring in less money next year.
The expectation is?
Yeah,
Or do
so
you
we're
know that?
projected to, and I do have these numbers. Currently at 199 per thousand, we're projected to raise 101 million. We're projecting this year that we're going to collect 109. I mean, this is what we're seeing also at the county and other jurisdictions, that the decrease in property values in downtown is having an impact on the broader tax base. So we'll actually bring in less, we're projecting to bring in less
But
money.
we're talking about a significant drop in enrollment. And, you know, we saw the Student Success Act pass 5 years ago. At that time, part of the premise of the Student Success Act was that it would provide that change that people have been asking for since Measure 5. So,
Yeah, so I think it's important, Angela Bonilla, President, Portland Association of Teachers. I think it's also important to note that the Student Success Act, when it finally was really coming into effect, we were really using it to kind of stop the increasing impacts of COVID closures, right? So we were able to get additional staff. I know at Scott, where I worked, we went from 0 social workers to a part-time social worker, which was then lifted up to a full-time social worker. And that person was able to support us as we went out to homes to deliver Chromebooks and find our students. And I think with lower enrollment, we really do have an opportunity with this tax to make sure that we're providing additional supports for our students. We understand that our enrollment is lowering, but the needs of our students have increased. So even if we were collecting the same amount, we know that keeping educators in buildings and making sure that we have the assistants in those classrooms are going to make sure that we can support students as they come in with more impacts from trauma, from, you know, the continuing pandemic as they come into our schools.
So,
I'm also going to just maybe provide some historical context. So in 2002 and 2003, when PPS was looking at having the shortest school year in the nation, closing schools 5 weeks early, no spring sports, all the, you know, our employees took caps on their health insurance, there were wage gives back, there was a whole host of things that happened and that were going to happen in 2002, 2003 before as we moved through the recession. And we saw a really significant enrollment drop at that time. And it wasn't because people had fewer babies, it's because the instability of feeling like there was going to be we were going to have the shortest school year in the nation, people made choices not to have their kids in Portland public schools, and we built the enrollment back. And when I look at the enrollment trends, it's yes, there is a birth rate component, but it's definitely not the driver of a lot of what you could attribute it to the enrollment drop. So I believe PPS is still a great value, and that we'll be able to get families back that left during COVID. I mean, it was a hard time for families. A lot of families chose, like, I can't have my student in a school that is not in person, or I want to have my child in an online academy, and I think people made other choices. I do believe we'll get our students back, many of them.
So this measure says that it would fund 660 teachers and support staff, and it says that that is approximately 20% of the total number. So 660 is 20%, so that's what, there's about 3,000 somehow
Educators.
educators?
Yep.
So I'm just curious, on a national basis, if I take the 44,000 and I divide by the 3,500, I come up with a number. How does that compare in terms of teacher-student ratio with other major cities in the country?
I think it really depends on the state that you're in. I was a superintendent in Colorado, Tennessee, and Oregon. And I would say class size variances across the states move quite a bit. For instance, in Tennessee, there is a cap on class size averages for, I think it's kindergarten through third. But what it does then is when your budgets are short, it puts enormous pressure because you can't increase class size.
Right.
It puts enormous pressure to lose things like art, music, PE, other kind of support systems that are so important.
Well, but I'm still trying to get a sense. So if we've got around 3,500 teachers and 44,000 students, I'm just wondering, how does our ratio stack up to Sacramento, to Denver, to other cities our size that have strong public school systems in which the middle class is still attending school?
So I would say the metric that most parents would use of what that would look like compared to other places is by class size and supports for the classroom. And there are some exceptions because some schools might have single strands, but generally across the district we have, I believe, lower class sizes than many other districts in Oregon and nationally.
So we're doing
Because of the local option.
Well, because of the local option, and I will say, because we also have services from the Student Success Act, which allows us to provide those additional supports, not with our local option.
So
But certainly, if we didn't have a local option, our class sizes would be, they just have to be higher. You
but
can't
right
take out-
now, with a local option, with the School Success Act, we tend to have a better student-teacher ratio than our peer districts around the country.
Well, I don't know which specific districts you're referring to, but I would say we have class sizes that are reasonable and that generally, and there depends on what grade you're at, but in our lower grade levels, we have lower class sizes than many other districts, and especially in Oregon that don't have a local option.
Do you have any sense, and this is not an objective question, so it's hard to measure, but you must have a gut, the degree to which the strike also affected the, for lack of a better word, the reputation of the school district, and may have encouraged some parents to either keep their kids out or pull them out?
Yeah, I mean, so before we went on strike, we held several community listening sessions in some of our most impacted neighborhoods in North and Northeast Portland. And at those sessions, we had families who were not yet Portland Public Schools parents who were coming in to hear a little bit more about what we were fighting for. And one thing that we heard from them was, we want to support whatever y'all are fighting for so that my kid can go into a strong school district. And what we saw during the strike was that we had something like 3,500 folks check in at our picket lines every single day for 15 days. The community support was immense, and I think what folks recognize is, and what I tell our educators is that, most people don't interact with the superintendent or our higher executives in our district. They interact with their classroom educator.
Right.
And so we end up being the face of the district. Right. And people trust us. They trust our educators to be there to tell the truth and to be there to support their students. And so I think what I've heard from families is a renewed sense of commitment to our district and a want to push our state to fully fund public education. So understanding that, there are some issues within our district that we need to push for more transparency and community input, but that we also need to have fully funded public education as a state. Measure 5 and Measure 50 have made very big impacts. I my husband went to what was Wilson High School back in the aughts.
Right.
And he remembers, you know, wood shop and all these services and classes that they were able to take, and slowly those had to go away because of our funding. And so, you know, Portland as a city always shows up for our schools. They showed up at our picket lines, they show up at the ballot box. And I think this levy is just another opportunity for our community to say, yeah, we stand for public education as a public good.
But you're certainly not unaware that after the strike, I mean, I can't imagine that you didn't get some feedback from people, particularly given that it at least appears that what you got after the strike was not much more than the district offered you to begin with, that there was, at least in some circles, a little bit of a loss of faith.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some folks who have seen the strike and saw, you know, that there were big things that we were asking for and big dreams that we have for public education
Right.
that haven't gone away, right? I think sometimes there's that disappointment of dreaming big and not necessarily getting everything that you asked for.
Right.
But in the end, we ended up with stronger language for special education. Our special education students are going to receive more services and more supports. What I've also heard from families, I was actually at a viewing of a movie this weekend with a bunch of families and students, special education students, was their gratitude for lifting up those issues.
Right.
I think sometimes we forget that we have so many different communities within our district, and some who have felt ignored or unseen for a very long time. And those are the folks that we were choosing to lift up during our strike.
So, one other question. In your opinion, are we currently in the Portland School District fully funding education, or are we not?
In the Portland district
In the
compared
Portland
to
School
other
District?
districts?
No, just,
or-
I mean, you talk about the need to fully fund education, and I'm wondering if, now that the strike is over and you've got your agreement in place, if you believe that Portland School District is fully funding education, or if there's more need.
I think there is overall more need. We have a statewide quality education model that we've never funded to. And so the state as a whole knows this is what quality education looks like, and we've never funded the state school fund.
Can you try to really quickly define for me what that means? Because I got to tell you, I talk to legislators all the time, and they say quality education model is a joke, it means nothing.
Yeah, so the
So-
quality education model is created by the Quality Education Commission, which includes leaders from, unions, in education sectors.
Right.
And they come together and they evaluate what are the current needs of our students and what are things that a good quality education has. So that includes school nurses, that includes arts and visual performing arts and things like that, right? It also includes smaller class sizes, and actually facilities that are safe and healthy.
So what would it take? Can you give me a dollar amount?
Yeah,
per
last
student
time,
or per-
last quality education model report that came out, it was I think it was almost $12 billion to fully fund public education to the quality education model across the state.
As opposed to,
What we received, which was 10.4 billion,
okay, so we're,
right?
I think it's 10.2.
10.2, thank you.
so 10 to 15% less than you believe the quality education model calls for. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Absolutely.
So,
I want to go back to just a question about the strike, because yes, there may have been impacts. I mean, I think we can't underestimate the impact of COVID. And so for example, if a family chose not to enroll their student in PPS, younger siblings have a trailing impact. I think that had a much bigger impact
Than
on
the strike.
Than the strike. For sure, I heard from lots of parents about the impact of the strike and how hard it was on them. But I didn't hear, nor do I know of a lot of people who left PPS because of the strike.
so we've
But
had,
I do want to, like, the COVID for sure, I had lots of parents tell me, like,
yeah.
I made different choices, and actually I found another choice. I mean, Line Academy was a great example of people, like, it turns out this was a better choice for my student.
So, we have a Metro money measure on the ballot. We have had a governor say no new taxes. I realize this is a re-up, not a new tax, but could you give us a couple of examples or make an argument for the fiscal responsibility of the school district? Why should voters believe that you're spending the money that they currently send to you effectively?
because I think if you look at our schools across the district, I'm going to compare today's schools compared to when my kids were in school. So I was a PPS parent for 18 years. And you know what? My kids, many years, didn't get art, music, and PE. There certainly weren't social workers. There weren't enough counselors. They didn't have the full menu of career technical education courses that they currently have. They were in buildings, like the high schools were horrible, the ones they were in. And I look at now what we have offered. I think we've been good stewards of the bond funds. We've delivered the high schools, and I think when you look at the high schools we've delivered, look at McDaniel's enrollment, it went from 900, I think it's 1,500 now. I mean, it has responded. Like, people, like, this is a quality learning environment for our students. And I think with the local option funds, again, if you look at mostly across the district, our class sizes are smaller, there's supports for our students, there are a lot of social emotional supports that don't exist in other districts, and I think we responded to what our students needed. Coming out of the pandemic, it was clear they needed social emotional supports, and if you look at across the district in our schools, that we've provided those. So I think we've tried to be really responsive and use the dollars to really impact what's happening in the classroom, and knowing the impact that COVID and the school closures had on students.
So if you go back 25 years to a KPMG audit that Ron Saxton
This was
pushed
before
for,
even I was on before it.
it identified
1999.
it identified the Blanchard building, for example, as an asset that the district probably really shouldn't have, and that 10.5 acres of essentially waterfront property, it's basically a parking lot. I mean, it's a low slung, low quality millstone in some ways around the district's neck that it hasn't yet taken KPMG's advice from 25 years ago to move on from it.
You know, I was in the top seat for 18 years as a superintendent in 3 districts. And for the last 9, I've worked in hundreds of districts across the nation in 2 CEO positions. I spent 26 years as a result trying to explain school finance to community members, employees, family members, etc. And it's challenging. It's challenging because it's a big business, but people want to see it as a school budget. And so whether or not we have the central office in the right place or the wrong place, I can say that the transparency on the budget, and particularly during times of stress, like a strike, there was a lot of scrutiny into that budget. And there will continue to be a lot of scrutiny, and I think that's the right thing to do. But I don't know that we can pull up something from whatever year you just said, 1999, and say whether or not that was the right pressure point at that time, or are there different pressure points?
My point is that there are ways that are visible to judge organizations on whether they're using money efficiently, whether they're nimble, whether they're creative with their limited financial resources. And at times the district has appeared to be whatever the opposite of nimble
And
is.
I can't, I'm going to say one more thing, and I'll try to say. I can't comment on that time, but I can tell you, as I'm a very experienced superintendent, which means I'm old, a very experienced superintendent, it is not easy to be nimble and agile when you're working in a public setting like this. And when you're trying to do budget work from December to April 24th, there's very little nimbleness in there, but we're getting it done, and I'm almost done, okay? If you go back to 2009 or 1999 or 2000, we had a year to plan and to communicate about reductions. This particular year, it's really, really tight. So I just wanted to make that comment about transparency.
We understand that it's a difficult role that central administration plays. However, it's a lot of money. You're asking voters in one of the most highly taxed jurisdictions in the country to there's no guarantee that when you put a levy on the ballot that you get to re-up it every time.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess what I'm pushing for is an argument that this is a good investment, and I can show you that it's a good investment because, gee, look what I did the last time you gave me money, or look how I am looking at a district that's gone from 80,000 students to soon it'll be 40,000 students, and we've disposed of all this surplus real estate, or we've made hard decisions. So I understand it's a hard job. Nobody ever said it wasn't, and it's done in public, and you have a lot of competing constituencies and a lot of critics, but, you know, make me believe, make
I'm
us
going
believe.
to specifically answer the BESC, because that's the context you asked.
The headquarters building.
The Blanchard Building, which is now the Profit Center. So in 1999, so I came onto the board at that point in time, and everybody was like, that's a great idea. I mean, we had no reserves, there's no contingency. I mean, it was
Yeah.
way worse.
Cupboard was bare.
Yeah, the cupboard was bare. We were looking under the cushions. And we did look at selling it. One of the things that existed at the time is 3 floors down. I did this 2 or 3 times with my 3rd grade students, my kids, was a commercial kitchen that produced, by scratch, 30,000 something meals a day. And so when people looked at the Blanchard Building and said, you should just be able to sell it. It's just like office, you know, like administrators sitting in offices. And the reality is you go deep into that building, you have a maintenance shop that maintains 80 very old buildings. You had a commercial kitchen that did that. And there wasn't a viable alternative, especially on the commercial kitchen at the time. There was a second look at it. And eventually now it's not made by scratch. It used to be like whatever the bread that was served was like literally baked in
Homemade.
baked in the Blanchard Building. But now it's more of a distribution center for the breakfasts and lunches, but we still have the maintenance department. And we have looked in the past at selling it, and the reality is, and this, I think over the next couple weeks, maybe months, we're gonna see that to actually move all the services is more than you're going to get out of the building. So yes, it's prime waterfront.
But imagine
property.
if you'd come to that conclusion 25 years ago, as opposed to
Oh, but I think-
you're saying
Well,
after
it-
a quarter of a century, you've determined that maybe
No, it didn't
you
make
can't
s-
dispose of this asset.
No, it didn't make sense before. We looked at it. I mean, we had other offers. And for example, when the Diamond Project came into baseball and said, we'll give you $80 million, we said, we don't think, and based on the research we'd done, and we had it all pressure tests to actually move the functions to somewhere else, cost more than we were going to get for the property.
So
So-
you're telling me the school board's going to keep that building?
What I would say is we are going to do our fiduciary responsibilities. Albina Vision Trust has said they're all in on an all-in cost for us to move.
Mhm.
And I asked several questions before I voted for that resolution, which
Right.
is what included all in?
Right.
I mean, if we have to stand up a new warehouse facility,
Right.
a new maintenance facility, like
Right.
that's, from my definition, all in, because we have that function right now. So the reality is, it hasn't been cost effective. We'd be actually taking money, we'd either actually have to put it on the bond, which I don't think people would really be very supportive of, when
But-
we've got crumbling schools, or take the dollars out of operating
But-
if it's not a cost.
Julie, you realize Nigel's larger question, which is, you know, you're telling us stuff that has never been communicated to the public at a whole. And the question is the school district both doing its best at being a financially responsible broker and also communicating that to the public? And Julie, you know, you're arguably the most fiscally responsible board member that the school board has seen.
It's hard to get a nickel out of me.
Yeah, for 30 years. So none of this is personal.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, you know, we hear from people who are saying there's, you know, Jefferson is going to be a Taj Mahal and it's going to have an enrollment of 300 people. And there's no one even thinking about what the enrollment at Jefferson's going to be like. So the
We
question...
are. Actually, the board has directed the superintendent to come up with a neighborhood boundary, because you know why Jefferson has that enrollment? Because it's the only, other than Benson, the only what used to be a neighborhood school that has no neighborhood boundary. Every student who goes to Jefferson has a guaranteed choice to go to a different school.
Right.
And so one of the things the school board did when it said we're going to rebuild Jefferson is, and we are going to give Jefferson a real neighborhood boundary. Because right now, actually, the number of students they have, it's a function of district policy. And that needs to change.
And I hear the questions about history and financial stewardship, and I think that's appropriate and fair. I think the beauty of this school levy is that it's very specific. And it is a subgroup of the budget. People can go in and say, did they actually hire this many teachers, or were there this many classroom aides? And that's why I think that we're here to explain that.
I forget, did you work in Salem?
I did.
As one of your roles? So what's the sort of eureka moment that you've had now that you've gotten under the hood in Portland? What has surprised you?
I am so glad you asked that question. One of the things that surprised me is I shouldn't say surprised, but I'm learning it about in a more hands-on way, is the enormous passion and support for the public school system here. I'm also pleasantly surprised at the huge amount of talent in the community, people that ask hard questions, they advocate a lot, they come to the boardroom and tell us what they want and don't want, but also the talent in the staff. Amazing talent in the staff here. The third thing that I kind of heard about, but I wasn't as close to, is this is a very deep and wide curriculum offerings that we have here. To have visual and performing arts, to have the language, dual language DLI schools that we have, you don't see that in a lot of districts. And I was in Salem from 2006 to end of year 2013. So I went through the Great Recession, so to speak. Last comment. And I watched what Salem had to do compared to, because of the state property, we can't pass a local option there, compared to what Portland is able to do. It's a very much a community that supports public schools.
So those are all great
Yeah.
observations. So what's the negative surprise that you've had? What's the thing that you said, oh, gee.
The negative surprise is the passion can come at you from so many directions. It's hard to get your handle around coming to consensus on priorities. Everything's a priority. And I'll just say one more time, I started February 12th. I'll present a budget. Then I leave at the end of June. A new superintendent will come in. I think there needs to be a lot of community engagement around helping employees understand budgets and finances, partnering with community agencies that can help the community understand also. That's going to be a challenge.
Has the board asked you as part of this limited term assignment to leave them with any kind of a written document that is sort of the brass tacks? Here's what I like, here's what I don't like, here's what I would change if I were going to be here for 5 years?
Yes.
And
We already talked about this last week.
That'll be a public document.
Mhm. If it's presented to the board, it'll definitely be a public document
Yeah.
when it's presented to the board.
I also want to go back to your question about just the facilities, because there's lots of different ways you're fiscally responsible with resources, and there's the operating side, and there's also the capital side. And I'll say, because I've been around a long time, I closed 9 schools. We sold Washington High School. And over time, from you go to the height of the baby boom when there was 70,000 students in PPS and we had 14 comprehensive high schools, well, things have changed. And I think boards have taken action when they needed to. So you had my high school, so Washington, Monroe, Jackson, and Adams all closed at the same time. In the last decade, Marshall closed. I was part of closing nine schools. That we have adjusted our footprint. You have to be careful because once you close the school, first of all, it's the hardest cuts to make. You get the littlest value for the most community pain to close a school. And so you need to be thoughtful about how to do that and know that it's not going to be, the enrollment's going to stay down at the current level. Like I say, I look at the enrollment from right after 2002 and 2003 when lots of people were like, I'm out of here, that we built that back up. And so I would hate for us to do things around closing schools that didn't have a long-term lens. But I say, I've made those, I've taken those votes for sure. And I say, if it makes sense for us to sell the profit center, not in a way that's subsidized, absolutely, we're planning on doing. We have a work plan that we're working through, and we're doing that assessment right now. What are the functions that need to be stood up? And from my standpoint, the fiscally responsible thing is to make sure that we can stand those up somewhere else. They continue to support our school district in a way that doesn't cost the district any additional resources.
What school building is possibly likely to be shut down?
What school?
What elementary school?
Well, I think you'd need to look at what the long-term like neighborhood enrollment trends. Like you can have, for example, an apartment complex open up and change the trajectory of a neighborhood.
But is there a school
Neighbor
that
school.
you're particularly concerned about because enrollment's dropping and you're not seeing that kind of?
I'm concerned about all the elementary schools that are, under 200 for sure, under 250. Because it's hard to offer a viable program. You can't offer you can't offer, in fact, that's where you see some of the larger class sizes, because if you can't offer 2 classes of first grade, and you just take, you only have enough students for 1, and a couple kids move into the neighborhood,
Gotcha.
they just go into that class. So yeah, I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned about the middle schools that are under 500, again, because of the programmatic offerings.
Can I go rogue here for a second? And I'm just curious to ask the 3 of you your opinion about the Florida law which bans cell phones in school for kids under 14, I think. It's come out in concert with Jonathan Haidt's book, which is basically talking about the destruction of our young people because of cell phones. I'm sure it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I'm just wondering, would the 3 of you support such a move in Oregon schools?
I'll jump in on that. I think there's plenty of evidence that the way students are doing, the things that young people are doing with social media is not pulling them in the right direction in terms of confidence and self-image, ability to communicate well. I don't know we can blame the phone. I think if the access to social media is going to be available regardless of the device. And I'm not a big fan of legislation that tries to control student behaviors, when I would hope that teachers and parents would be educating students as partners around things like that, rather than just thinking a ban is
Well,
going to
I
fix it.
think the extreme version of this is, parents and educators who think phones are as dangerous as guns and don't want phones in the school, in the same way I'm sure you would support no guns in the school. So, but it sounds like you would not support that. I'm just wondering, do you have any?
Yeah, so as an educator, what I know is when we ban something, it just means that that kids will find a way to hide what they are doing.
So you would not support such a
So I don't think it would be effective. I agree with Dr. Husk that when we think about what the ills of technology that impact our students are, it's really the negative self-image that comes from social media, because we also have to think about our most marginalized students who find community online, right? But that's not necessarily because they're scrolling on Instagram. That might be through online video game playing or other resources. So I think I worry about making, having legislation that says that we can't do cell phones in schools.
Yeah,
You're also a no.
Pardon? No, I have I'm a parent of 3 kids, and I've seen the impact that phones can have. I mean, back when.
This is,
We're not moving enough.
We're not fighting
Okay,
enough.
I was just about ready to share how when it used to be your cell phone bills had every text. One month my daughter had 13,000. It's a true thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your text, each one would come through. So like my daughter had 13,000 texts 1 year in high school. I mean 1 month. 1 month.
Wow.
And I was like, that was like one every. I did the calculation. It's like that's ridiculous. And it was all about the social things and like definitely taking her away from the classroom. So I think there's definitely we should think about what the appropriate rules are and guidelines. It's interesting if you go out to, I think you should go out to Mount Scott Learning Center, which is an alternative school kind of in the Mount Scott Arleta neighborhood. They have no cell phones, and the way that they do this, that is, when if you go to a concert and you have to put your phone in one of those locking zip pouches.
Right.
So literally, their students get a pouch,
Right.
and when they walk in the door, it gets put in the pouch and it's locked. And it's the same technology. And literally then when they leave, they unlock it and take their phones out. And at first the kids were like, I can't believe you're doing to this is horrible. And what they found is like at lunchtime, kids are actually talking to other kids, interacting with each other and not sitting there on their phones. It's really interesting. So I think there's could be a lot of potential positive, and you could actually do it in a way. I'll just say some things when I think about the complexities of it, though. I'd also say that a lot of parents, the randomness of there could be a school shooting or something happening at a school, of them being able to reach their students. So I think parents might have also a point of view about it. And then the last thing, this is from when I went to North Salem, which is one of the schools that's lower income in Salem. I was a student for the day there, and frankly, instead of at a lot of our schools, kids walk in with like their MacBooks and are using their computers. In those classes I saw, the high school class, I saw most students, because they didn't have Chromebooks,
All they have is a phone.
they had their phone. So they're looking up things on their phone and using that as their tool because they don't have a laptop they're bringing to class.
Related, okay, I got you. So related question. During the ice storm or whatever, when schools were shut down, if I understand things correctly, there was no, whatever is the word for it, telecommuting, teleeducation.
Virtual.
Right.
Yeah.
Virtual education. And as I understand it, the reason for that is in part because of the belief that there's some students who don't have access to computers. And so you're concerned about the equity issue. Is that-
Computers and internet.
Right.
Yeah,
So
internet.
New York City, during the storm, shut down. They had virtual schools. They have more students that don't have internet access, and yet they weren't worried about it. So I'm just wondering how you think about educating kids at a moment when it might make sense to teach them on the computer, but you worry about the 2% of kids who don't have phones or don't have access to computer. If that was the real reason why the district
Well, also,
decided not
everybody
to.
didn't have their Chromebooks at home. I mean, a whole host of reasons. And
Right.
we don't, across the district, and Angela, you could probably correct me, have one-to-one Chromebooks for all of our students. But I think it's great. I think it's something we should definitely look at. I mean, I know I've got a friend who teaches as a principal in Atlanta, and they just switched to virtual when they have inclement weather for whatever reason. So I think it's worth working in. It's a muscle we certainly flex during, especially if we're not going to make up the days. I mean, if we make up the days, then you actually can. I mean, you're making it up in a different way. But if we're not going to make up the days, then I think we should absolutely look at that.
Can I throw a random one in since you did? Do you remember when a lot of districts and states started saying you can't have soda pop machines inside the schools? Did it impact obesity?
No.
I have no idea, but
No.
my guess is not.
It didn't. And that's my reflection on statewide bans on something. That's not getting to the core issue.
Uh-huh.
The core issue is, why is the use of the phone hurting the kid? That's what led to the ban. Did banning it solve that core issue? Probably not.
And I'm originally from New York City, and I know that as a city there are so many initiatives to ensure that folks have access to the internet. You can walk down the street, there's a kiosk you can plug into to charge your phone and use the internet, which replaced our old payphone kiosks, right? So
Right.
I think also it's something to be said about the difference in infrastructure in a city like New York versus a city like Portland, where we have New York doesn't have wires above ground. A lot of our electricity and things are underground. So I think the impacts for students when it comes to a storm disrupting education is going to be greater than a place like New York City that has more infrastructure. What I remember working at schools like Rigler and Scott, which are our Title I schools in Northeast Portland, is that when we were delivering our Chromebooks, we had families who were like, well, we don't have internet, what can we do with this? And then having to go back and get internet Wi-Fi hotspots for them.
Right.
We have students and families who are not necessarily super literate in using technology like that, because if you're using touchscreen, having a laptop is a different function, especially if if you have a first grader.
Sure.
So I think it's important to recognize that those barriers aren't just like we don't want to work and we don't want to teach kids. It's true that we have families who will not access education, who often happen to be the families that are also have students who are further behind than others. And instead of increasing that gap by making sure that we have class for those who have a computer, have internet, have access, and those who don't, too bad, we're moving along. That seems like a way to increase inequity as opposed to make up for a lack of schooling.
So can I also ask you just quickly about absenteeism? So the truancy level is kind of outrageous here. But here's what I understand. So if you're a student at Lincoln and you're truant, you have to be designated, somebody at the district has to say you are officially truant, is that correct? Or, well, I don't know what the right word is. And then at that moment, does the money no longer go to Lincoln High School for that student?
No, it's student enrollment that drives the.
So once they hit the October count, they're in.
Yeah,
No matter.
at least it was back in 2013 when I was
I
superintendent
think
of
that's
Salem.
still
So once they hit the
Yes.
October count, then even if they never attend school
again.
again, they get the money for that year.
But isn't there a recount in February?
There may be, I'll check.
I mean,
It used to be
clearly,
October.
clearly, we want our kids to come to school. I mean, we don't want them not to come to school so that we can just collect their money. I mean, we want our kids in school, and we want to. I mean, I think that's partly why we make sure that at all levels that students have access. Go ahead.
But if a
I know you
student
don't-
is truant and isn't showing up at school, you can get him to a different school, right?
Yeah,
Like
Scott.
Mount Scott or,
Alliance. I mean, we have
POIC.
lots of
right?
Virtual
POIC,
settlers.
I'm thinking of POIC,
Yeah.
right?
Or Rosemary. Yeah.
And then Rosemary Anderson gets that money, right? But if you have all these kids who are truant, but they haven't been designated as truant, and they're hanging out at a bowling alley,
well, here, for one
After 10
thing.
days, they get off
I've
the
been worrying.
rolls.
I've been worrying about this, and I've been watching this again across the nation because I was a CEO instead of a
so
superintendent.
you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about, but I think the question is, are they truant or is there another reason for the absenteeism? So when I see these news reports that come out about the absenteeism rate, which is a great spark to say, what are we going to do about this? The first thing you have to figure out is why. Why are they not showing up? It tends to be younger aged kids, according to the data I've seen. Haven't seen a ton of it. Why are parents saying it's okay to miss? Is it that they don't understand kindergarten and the needs of kindergartners? Or is it a kid who is chronically absent, truant, because they're choosing not to attend school? Those are two different problems to solve for. So I keep waiting for the study that tells me why.
And why do you think it's so much worse in Portland?
I think that it's worse in our more urban areas, and I think Portland fits that diagram. By the way, I would never compare Portland Public to Sacramento School District. They're two very different systems,
Okay.
just as a for example.
So does the
Okay.
district have all the kids' cell phone numbers?
I don't know. Do all the kids have cell phones?
Well,
Not all of them. So depending on when the student gets the cell phone and whether it's added by the parent when they fill out their roster.
Thank you.
You might not have a student cell phone.
but
It
do you
depends on
have-
also the grade.
You have a lot of them? I mean, because it's sort of new from when we were all kids. You're a lot younger than some of the people in this room, but I would think that there's greater access in a way to track where kids are, or at least to contact them and send them a text and say, hey, we're looking for, we miss you.
And these
Where are you?
again are solutions if that's the issue. If the
Uh-huh.
issue is intentionally the kid is staying home, then pulling in a system to ping them in a positive way.
Uh-huh.
We miss you, we want you in school. That's a different issue than 5, 6, and 7-year-olds not showing up.
Right, but I'm just trying to understand bureaucratically, if you're a 15-year-old and you're not attending school, does the district have to formally say you are truant and therefore you need to go to Mount Scott or Rosemary Anderson? I just don't understand how that works.
I don't know where, again, I don't know all the Oregon laws right this minute, but I would say there's definitely a moral obligation to find out where the kid is and why they're there and how to get them back in.
And we have attendance officers at all of our schools, whether it's like one attendance officer for the whole high school or a couple, or just like one that's going between a few elementary schools. And what they do is often reach out out to families, reach out to those students and ask, okay, what's going on? How can we support you? How can we get you back at school? I know at the elementary level, sometimes that looks like our counselor and attendance coach buying alarm clocks for folks because like the kid, they just don't have an alarm clock. Or it can be, you know, talking with them about like what are some safe routes to school because parents work nights, so they're not awake in the morning when the kid has to get ready to go to school. So maybe there's someone else that you can check in with. Like Dr. Huss is saying, there's so many reasons why students might not be in school or might be truant or might be absent. And that's why we have those coaches to kind of get to that root and figure out why. I think also kind of coming back to the levy, the idea, what I understood as a student and what I see from middle and high school students is a lot of those core enrichment classes, theater, dance, arts, extracurriculars, those are the things that keep kids engaged in school once they have the, you know, physical choice to say, I don't want to go today. And when we renew this levy, we're able to continue to invest in making sure that we have a wide range of services and programs for students. So we can continue to try to bring students back into schools through all these other systems and programs, but we also need to make sure that we have the things that keep kids excited about school in our schools.
Great. You done?
I'm done.
Okay, thank you all for coming in.
Nice to meet you both.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.